If you enjoyed this audiobook, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. Sharing it with your friends and family helps spread knowledge, and when we help others grow, we glow too. Thank you so much for listening. Let's dive into the audiobook. Chapter 1: The Roots of Undervaluation. When Silence Costs Power. Part 1: The Birth of the Pay Gap. How history set the stage for modern salary imbalance. When the first factory whistles echoed across Manchester in the 1840s, they signaled more than the start of the workday. They marked the beginning of a systematic devaluation of human labor that would ripple through centuries. The Industrial Revolution didn't just change how we worked, it fundamentally altered how we were paid, creating the foundation for today's salary disparities. The factory system introduced a radical concept: workers as interchangeable parts in a vast machine. Factory owner Samuel Slater deliberately recruited entire families, paying men as heads of household while compensating women and children at fractional rates for identical tasks. This wasn't accidental. It was strategic. By establishing different pay scales based on social roles rather than productivity, early industrialists created a template that justified unequal compensation for generations. Consider the Lowell mills in Massachusetts during the 1830s. Female textile workers earned roughly half of what their male counterparts received, despite operating the same machinery for identical hours. When these women organized the first labor strikes in American history, mill owners responded by importing immigrant workers willing to accept even lower wages. This pattern, using social hierarchies to suppress wages, became the blueprint for modern employment practices. The absence of pay transparency proved equally damaging. Companies like Carnegie Steel deliberately kept salary information secret, preventing workers from understanding their market value. Andrew Carnegie himself admitted in congressional testimony that secrecy allowed management to pay workers what the traffic would bear, rather than what their labor was worth. This opacity created an information asymmetry that persists in many industries today. Early labor contracts reinforced these imbalances through legal mechanisms. The 1875 case of Payne v. Western and Atlantic Railroad established that employers could fire workers for good cause, for no cause, or even for cause morally wrong. This at-will employment doctrine made questioning compensation a potentially career-ending decision. Gender played a particularly destructive role in wage determination. The 1866 National Labor Union explicitly advocated for family wages, paying men enough to support entire households while keeping women's wages deliberately low to discourage their participation in the workforce. This policy wasn't just cultural preference. It was economic strategy designed to maintain a reserve army of cheap labor. Professional fields weren't immune to these forces. Law firms in the early 1900s operated on strict hierarchical systems where partners set associate salaries without input or negotiation. Medical practices followed similar patterns, with senior physicians determining compensation for younger doctors based on tenure rather than skill or contribution. These historical practices created cultural norms that branded salary discussions as impolite, ungrateful, or even disloyal. The Victorian era's emphasis on propriety transformed financial conversations into social taboos. Workers learned that questioning compensation meant questioning authority, a dangerous proposition in hierarchical societies. The Great Depression cemented these patterns. With unemployment reaching 25%, workers accepted any available wages without complaint. This desperation became normalized behavior that extended well into post-war prosperity, creating generations who viewed salary negotiation as risky rather than routine. Part 2: The Culture of Gratitude. Why workers learn to say thank you instead of how much. Most workers today trace their reluctance to discuss money back to their grandparents' kitchen tables, where financial conversations happened in whispers after children went to bed. This learned behavior wasn't accidental. It was the result of decades of economic conditioning that turned gratitude into a survival mechanism. When IBM employees in the 1950s received their annual reviews, they thanked their managers for any raise, no matter how small, because questioning compensation seemed ungrateful and dangerous. The Great Depression's aftermath created what economists call grateful worker syndrome, where employees developed an almost religious reverence for steady employment. General Motors workers in the 1940s would tell their families they felt blessed to have jobs even when working 60-hour weeks for wages that barely covered rent. This mentality spread across industries like a cultural virus, infecting professional attitudes for generations. Corporate leaders recognized the power of this psychology and weaponized it. At companies like AT&T and General Electric, managers received training on how to frame compensation discussions around company loyalty and employee gratitude. They learned to respond to salary requests with phrases like, "We're disappointed you don't appreciate what we've already given you," or "Many people would be grateful for your position." These tactics transformed natural business negotiations into emotional manipulations. Fear reinforced gratitude as the primary workplace emotion. During the 1970s recession, Kodak employees watched hundreds of colleagues lose jobs while management emphasized how fortunate the remaining workers were to still be employed. This created a psychological prison where asking for raises felt like tempting fate. Workers developed superstitious thinking around compensation, as if discussing money might somehow jinx their employment security. The etiquette rules around money conversations became more rigid than Victorian dining protocols. Business schools taught that salary discussions should be brief, apologetic, and framed around company benefits rather than personal worth. Harvard Business School's 1980s curriculum actually included sections on gracious acceptance of employer offers, suggesting that prolonged negotiations damaged professional relationships. Women faced additional psychological conditioning that linked financial assertiveness to unfeminine behavior. When Mary Wells became the first female advertising agency president in 1966, she later revealed that she initially accepted a salary 30% below her male predecessors because asking for more felt pushy and ungrateful. Her experience reflected millions of women who learned to view financial advocacy as social rebellion. This culture of gratitude created measurable economic consequences. Federal Reserve data shows that workers who negotiated salaries in the 1960s earned 15% more over their careers than those who didn't. Yet only 12% of employees attempted negotiations. The majority remained trapped in a mindset where saying "thank you" felt safer than asking "how much." This psychological conditioning didn't just limit individual earnings. It systematically suppressed wage growth across entire industries, creating the foundation for modern salary stagnation that persists today. Part 3. Psychology of Worth, the internal battle before the first word is spoken. That moment when Sarah stared at her computer screen, paralyzed by a simple email draft requesting a salary review, reveals the invisible war raging inside millions of professionals daily. Despite earning 3 consecutive performance awards, she couldn't bring herself to type the words that might secure the raise she deserved. Her internal dialogue, a toxic mix of self-doubt and catastrophic thinking, had more power over her financial future than her documented achievements. The psychology of worth operates like a hidden operating system, running complex calculations about value, deservingness, and risk before any negotiation begins. Dr. Amy Cuddy's Harvard research demonstrated that individuals with lower confidence literally shrink their physical presence, adopting what she termed low-power poses that neurologically reinforce feelings of inadequacy. When Microsoft executive Satya Nadella suggested in 2014 that women should trust good karma rather than ask for raises, he inadvertently exposed how deeply psychological conditioning shapes professional behavior. Imposter syndrome strikes even the most accomplished professionals. Maya Angelou, despite winning Grammy Awards and presidential honors, famously said, "I have written 11 books, but each time I think, uh-oh, they're going to find out now. I've run a game on everybody. and they're going to find me out. This internal skeptic whispers that any request for higher compensation will expose perceived inadequacy, making the risk feel existential rather than professional. Social comparison amplifies these internal struggles. Behavioral economist Dan Ariely's experiments showed that people consistently undervalue their contributions when comparing themselves to others, even when presented with identical performance data. The accountant who discovers colleagues earn more often concludes they must possess superior skills, rather than recognizing they simply asked for better compensation. Fear of rejection triggers ancient survival instincts that treat salary discussions like physical threats. Neuroscientist Matthew Lieberman's UCLA studies revealed that social rejection activates the same brain regions as physical pain, explaining why the possibility of hearing no feels genuinely dangerous. This biological response transforms rational financial conversations into emotional minefields. Childhood conditioning creates lasting imprints on professional behavior. Those raised in households where money discussions were taboo, or where asking for things was discouraged, carry these restrictions into boardrooms. Research from the University of Chicago found that individuals from lower socioeconomic backgrounds consistently negotiated less aggressively, even after achieving professional success. The hierarchy effect compounds these challenges. Stanford's organizational behavior studies show that perceived power distances make subordinates dramatically less likely to initiate compensation discussions. Even senior professionals report feeling like children when approaching authority figures about money, regardless of their actual value to the organization. Understanding these psychological patterns becomes the foundation for breaking free from them. Recognition doesn't eliminate the fear, but it transforms an unconscious barrier into a manageable challenge. The professionals who successfully advocate for themselves haven't conquered their inner critic. They've learned to act despite it. Part 4. The Turning Point. When awareness sparked the modern salary revolution. When Jennifer Serrane tweeted about her salary in 2019, she received death threats. 2 years later, the same transparency earned her a promotion and speaking engagements. The difference wasn't courage, it was timing. Serrane posted during the height of a digital revolution that had already begun dismantling decades of workplace silence. The watershed moment arrived quietly in 2007 when Robert Homan launched Glassdoor from his kitchen table. Frustrated by the secrecy surrounding compensation at his previous employer, Expedia, Homan created a platform where employees could anonymously share salary information. The initial response was tepid. Early adopters worried about employer retaliation, and many professionals still considered discussing pay unprofessional. The 2008 financial crisis changed everything. As layoffs swept through industries and bonuses disappeared, workers realized their loyalty hadn't protected them. Suddenly, knowing market rates became survival. Glassdoor's user base exploded from thousands to millions virtually overnight. Employees who had once whispered salary information in bathroom stalls began typing it into databases accessible to millions. This digital awakening coincided with several high-profile scandals that shattered public trust in corporate fairness. The 2015 Sony email hack exposed massive pay disparities between male and female executives, with Jennifer Lawrence earning significantly less than her male co-stars in American Hustle, despite being the biggest name. The revelation sparked industry-wide conversations that had been brewing privately for decades. Corporate America's response was defensive, then strategic. Companies like Buffer and Whole Foods began publishing salary bands publicly, not from altruism, but from competitive necessity. As transparency became a recruiting tool, organizations realized that pay secrecy often hurt them more than transparency would. Legislative momentum followed public pressure. Iceland mandated equal pay certification in 2018. California, New York, and Colorado passed salary transparency laws requiring employers to include pay ranges in job postings. These weren't radical departures. They were responses to a workforce that had already begun demanding transparency through online platforms and professional networks. The Me Too movement accelerated these changes by connecting pay inequality to broader power imbalances. Women began sharing stories, not just about harassment, but about systematic undervaluation. The conversation expanded beyond gender to include race, age, and other factors that influenced compensation decisions. LinkedIn transformed from a digital resume platform into a salary negotiation training ground. Posts about successful negotiations received hundreds of thousands of views. Young professionals began treating salary discussions like any other professional skill, studying market data and practicing their pitches. Professional associations and unions adapted their messaging from job security to pay equity. The Writers Guild of America negotiated pay transparency clauses into contracts. Tech workers organized informal salary sharing groups that bypassed corporate policies. This cultural shift created a feedback loop. As more employees negotiated successfully, stories spread through professional networks. Companies found themselves defending offers that seemed reasonable in boardrooms but appeared stingy on Glassdoor. The power dynamic that had favored employers for generations began shifting toward workers, armed with information and emboldened by collective action. Chapter 2: Preparing for Battle. The Strategy Before the Ask. Part 1: The Mirror Moment. Calculating your true market value. Most professionals guess at their market value, settling for salaries thousands below their actual worth. Research by Harvard Business School reveals that 57% of workers have never researched their market rate before negotiating, leaving substantial compensation on the table through pure ignorance. Your market value isn't a mysterious number floating in corporate boardrooms. It's a calculable figure based on concrete data points. Think of it like pricing a house. Real estate agents don't guess. They analyze comparable sales, square footage, location, and unique features. Your salary negotiation deserves the same methodical approach. Start with the foundational research tools that reveal industry standards. Websites like Glassdoor, PayScale, and Salary.com provide baseline figures, but dig deeper into specialized platforms for your field. Engineers might consult Levels.fyi, while marketing professionals turn to Marketing Salary Guide. Government data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics offers regional breakdowns that account for cost of living variations. Geographic location dramatically impacts compensation. A software developer earning $120,000 in Austin might command $180,000 in San Francisco for identical work. Yet cost-adjusted, the Austin salary often provides better purchasing power. Calculate both gross compensation and net value after housing, taxes, and living expenses to understand your true economic position. Experience creates exponential value curves, not linear progression. A marketing manager with 3 years earns differently than one with 6, but the gap isn't simply doubled. Industry experience often commands premiums over general experience. Someone managing campaigns for B2B software companies typically earns more than their counterpart at consumer goods companies, even with identical years of experience. Your unique skill combination creates value multipliers that generic salary surveys miss. Netflix famously pays engineers with machine learning expertise significantly above standard software development rates. Identify your niche intersections. Perhaps you combine financial analysis with healthcare knowledge, or speak Mandarin while managing supply chains. These combinations often justify premium compensation that standard benchmarks don't capture. Certifications and education provide measurable value additions. Project Management Professional, PMP. Certification typically adds 15 to 20% to base salaries. Advanced degrees show varying returns. MBAs often provide substantial boosts in consulting and finance, while PhD premiums depend heavily on industry application. Document everything systematically. Create a spreadsheet tracking salary ranges from multiple sources, noting experience requirements and geographic variations. This becomes your negotiation arsenal, not opinions, but documented market realities. When you tell an employer you're worth $95,000, you're not asking for generosity. You're stating a market-validated price based on comparable qualifications and performance. This preparation transforms negotiation psychology. Instead of hoping for approval, you're presenting evidence. Instead of feeling grateful for any offer, you're evaluating whether it meets market standards. That confidence shift from supplicant to equal participant changes everything about how employers respond to your requests. Armed with this data, you enter negotiations knowing your worth isn't debatable. The only question becomes whether this employer recognizes market value. Part 2. The Intel Advantage. Researching the employer's playbook. When Netflix stock plummeted 70% in 2022, employees who understood the company's financial position had dramatically different negotiation outcomes than those who walked in blind. The prepared candidates recognized Netflix was cutting costs, but still valued top talent retention. They positioned themselves as essential assets during turbulent times, rather than additional expenses. Information becomes your negotiation superpower. While most candidates stumble through salary discussions with vague hopes and emotional appeals, smart negotiators arrive armed with intelligence that transforms the entire conversation dynamic. Start with the company's financial health. Public companies reveal their hand through quarterly earnings reports, SEC filings, and investor presentations. When Salesforce announced record revenue growth of 25% in 2021, informed negotiators leveraged this prosperity to secure above-market offers. Private companies require more detective work, but platforms like Crunchbase, industry reports, and recent funding announcements provide crucial insights into their financial trajectory. Compensation philosophy varies dramatically between organizations. Google famously uses data-driven pay bands with minimal negotiation flexibility, while startups often offer equity-heavy packages with significant room for base salary adjustments. Research company reviews on Glassdoor, but dig deeper. Current employees on LinkedIn often share insights about recent compensation changes or internal restructuring affecting pay structures. Professional networks become intelligence goldmines when approached strategically. Former employees provide candid perspectives about internal pay practices. Industry conferences and professional associations connect you with peers who've negotiated similar roles. A simple coffee conversation with someone who left your target company 6 months ago often reveals more than hours of online research. During interviews, ethical intelligence gathering means asking thoughtful questions about compensation structure without seeming mercenary. How does the company approach performance-based compensation? Or, what does career progression typically look like in this role? These questions demonstrate strategic thinking while gathering valuable data about their compensation mindset. Job databases like Levels FYI for tech companies or PayScale for broader industries provide baseline data, but insider knowledge reveals the real story. When Spotify expanded their U.S. operations in 2020, they initially offered below-market salaries until candidates consistently declined. Internal referrals knew to negotiate aggressively, while external applicants accepted low-ball offers. This preparation fundamentally shifts negotiation dynamics. Instead of pleading for generosity, you're discussing market realities. Instead of justifying why you deserve more money, you're explaining how your compensation aligns with industry standards and company capability. When you tell Amazon you expect $130,000 based on their recent hiring patterns and financial performance, you're not asking for favors. You're stating informed expectations based on documented precedent. Armed with employer intelligence, negotiations become collaborative, problem-solving sessions rather than adversarial confrontations. You understand their constraints, they recognize your informed position, and together you find solutions that satisfy both parties' needs within realistic parameters. Part 3. Building the case, turning contributions into currency. When Netflix's former chief talent officer, Patty McCord, prepared to negotiate her own compensation, she didn't simply list her daily responsibilities. Instead, she documented how her hiring strategies reduced employee turnover by 40% while cutting recruitment costs by $2.3 million annually. This approach transforms routine achievements into compelling financial arguments that speak directly to business leaders' priorities. The difference between successful and failed salary negotiations often lies in translation. Your accomplishments mean nothing until you convert them into language that resonates with decision-makers. When software engineer Sarah Chen approached her manager at Microsoft, she didn't mention the countless hours spent debugging code. She presented evidence that her optimization work reduced server costs by $180,000 quarterly, while improving user response times by 23%. This framing connected her technical expertise directly to bottom-line impact. Quantification becomes your strongest ally in these conversations. Consider how Walmart's category managers approach internal promotions. They don't discuss vendor relationships or product placement strategies. Instead, they present data showing how their decisions increased category sales by specific percentages or reduced inventory costs by measurable amounts. This approach works because it speaks the universal language of business results. The storytelling element matters equally. Facts without context create confusion rather than conviction. When Adobe's product managers negotiate internally, they structure narratives around customer outcomes. They might explain how their feature recommendations led to 15% higher user retention, which translated to $4.2 million in recurring revenue. This approach connects individual contributions to organizational success through clear cause and effect relationships. Framing becomes crucial when presenting your case. Instead of saying you managed a team, explain how your leadership increased productivity by 28% while reducing project delivery times from 6 weeks to 4 weeks. Rather than mentioning your problem-solving skills, describe how your process improvements saved the company 200 hours monthly in operational efficiency. These translations help employers visualize the return on investment your higher salary would provide. The most persuasive arguments align personal success with organizational benefit. When Spotify's data analysts seek advancement, they don't emphasize their technical skills. They demonstrate how their insights drove user engagement metrics that directly influenced subscription growth. This alignment shows employers that investing in your compensation serves their broader business objectives. Smart negotiators prepare multiple examples across different impact categories. Revenue generation stories appeal to sales-driven organizations. Cost reduction narratives resonate with efficiency-focused companies. Innovation examples work well in technology environments. Having diverse proof points allows you to adapt your presentation based on what matters most to your specific audience and organizational culture. Your contributions become currency when you transform activities into outcomes, tasks into results, and responsibilities into measurable business impact that justifies the investment in your continued growth. Part 4. Anticipating the opposition. Preparing counterarguments before they're spoken. When Netflix's Reed Hastings faced investor pushback about executive compensation in 2018, he didn't scramble for answers. Instead, he methodically addressed each concern with prepared responses about retention, performance metrics, and competitive positioning. His success demonstrates a fundamental truth. The best negotiators never enter discussions hoping their arguments will hold up. They know they will because they've already stress-tested every possible objection. Employers rarely voice their concerns directly during salary negotiations. Instead, they offer vague responses about budget constraints or internal equity. Smart candidates prepare for these predictable patterns by developing responses before the conversation begins. This preparation transforms defensive moments into opportunities to demonstrate understanding and problem-solving skills. Budget limitations represent the most common employer concern, yet this objection often masks deeper issues. When Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff initially resisted equal pay audits due to cost concerns, advocates presented phased implementation plans with clear ROI projections. Similarly, candidates can address budget worries by offering flexible compensation structures, performance-based increases, or extended timelines for full implementation. Experience gaps create another frequent sticking point. Rather than dismissing these concerns, effective negotiators acknowledge the valid points while redirecting focus toward transferable skills and rapid learning ability. When Sarah Blakely pitched Spanx to department stores, despite lacking retail experience, she emphasized her customer insights and product knowledge instead of defending her resume gaps. Internal equity concerns require particularly delicate handling since they involve sensitive information about other employees. The key lies in focusing on external market data rather than internal comparisons. Research from Harvard Business School shows that candidates who reference industry benchmarks rather than colleague salaries achieve 23% better outcomes in negotiations. Preparing counterarguments involves more than crafting clever responses. It requires genuine empathy for the employer's position. When you understand their constraints, you can collaborate on creative solutions. Google's approach to retention negotiations exemplifies this mindset. They work with employees to identify non-monetary benefits that address individual needs while respecting organizational boundaries. The most powerful preparation technique involves role-playing conversations with trusted advisors. Practice articulating your responses until they feel natural rather than rehearsed. This preparation builds confidence that employers can sense. Creating a more collaborative atmosphere where both parties work toward mutually beneficial solutions. Consider the scenario where an employer claims salary parity concerns. Instead of arguing, acknowledge their commitment to fairness while presenting your unique value proposition. This approach demonstrates respect for their policies while maintaining your position's strength. The goal isn't winning an argument. It's creating partnership around shared problem-solving that benefits everyone involved. Chapter 3. The Negotiation Table, where words become leverage. Part 1. The Opening Move, timing the conversation for maximum impact. When Microsoft's head of global talent strategy, Susan Johnson, received a promotion offer in 2019, she made a critical error that cost her $15,000 annually. She accepted immediately, grateful for the opportunity, only to discover weeks later that her predecessor earned significantly more for identical responsibilities. The lesson? Timing transforms everything in salary conversations. The moment you choose to discuss compensation determines whether you're perceived as confident or desperate, strategic or pushy. Research from Harvard Business School shows that candidates who wait for initial offers before negotiating receive 7% higher starting salaries than those who mention money early in interviews. This happens because premature salary discussions position you as financially motivated rather than value-focused. Consider the case of Sarah Chen, a software engineer at Spotify. After completing a high-visibility project that reduced server costs by 30%, she scheduled a meeting with her manager within 2 weeks of the project's success. The timing created natural context for her request. Her value was immediately visible and measurable. She received a 12% raise, plus equity options. Contrast this with David Rodriguez, a marketing director who brought up salary during his second interview at Adobe. The conversation shifted uncomfortably as hiring managers hadn't yet assessed his capabilities. He received an offer 18% below market rate, spending months rebuilding his perceived value. The power balance shifts dramatically between pre-offer and post-offer negotiations. Before receiving an offer, you're competing against unknown candidates, weakening your position. After an offer, the company has invested time and resources in selecting you, making them more committed to closing the deal. Salesforce recruiters admit they expect 80% of candidates to negotiate post-offer, building flexibility into initial proposals. Strategic moments create natural openings for salary conversations. Performance reviews following successful projects provide built-in justification for increases. Annual budget planning cycles offer financial flexibility that mid-year requests lack. IBM employees who request raises during Q4 planning periods succeed 40% more often than those asking randomly throughout the year. Recognition creates momentum for compensation discussions. When accolades arrive, industry awards, client praise, or internal recognition, leverage exists naturally. Tesla engineer Maria Santos parlayed a patent approval into a 15% salary increase by initiating discussions within days of the announcement. External factors influence timing success. Market shifts, competitor moves, or industry growth spurts create urgency around talent retention. When Amazon announced significant salary increases in 2021, employees across tech companies used this news as timing catalysts for their own negotiations. The key lies in reading organizational rhythms. Budget approvals, leadership changes, and company performance cycles all impact decision-making capacity. Smart negotiators align their timing with these institutional patterns, maximizing receptivity while minimizing resistance. Part 2. Anchoring the value, making the first number count. When Google software engineer Alex Chen mentioned his salary expectations of $180,000 during his 2022 interview, the hiring manager's immediate response was $165,000, exactly $15,000 below his anchor. Chen's strategic opening number had just saved him from a potentially lower offer, demonstrating how the first figure mentioned becomes the gravitational center around which all subsequent negotiations orbit. Psychologists call this phenomenon anchoring bias, and it represents one of the most predictable quirks of human decision-making. When Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman first documented this cognitive shortcut in their groundbreaking research, they discovered that people unconsciously adjust their judgments toward any initial number they encounter, even when that number seems completely arbitrary. Real estate agents have exploited this principle for decades, knowing that listing prices heavily influence final sale amounts regardless of actual market value. In salary negotiations, whoever mentions the first number gains tremendous psychological advantage. Research from Columbia Business School shows that initial salary anchors account for up to 50% of the variance in final compensation packages. This means your opening figure literally shapes the employer's perception of what constitutes reasonable pay for your role. Setting an effective anchor requires careful calibration. Too low, and you leave money on the table permanently. Too high, and you risk appearing unrealistic or pricing yourself out of consideration. Netflix's talent acquisition team reports that candidates who anchor 10 to 15% above their realistic target typically receive offers closest to their actual desired range. Market research becomes your foundation. Glassdoor data, industry reports, and networking conversations provide the intelligence needed to establish credible boundaries. When Salesforce developer Jennifer Park researched comparable roles and discovered the market range was $140,000 to $170,000, she anchored at $165,000 during her interview. The final offer came in at $158,000, significantly higher than if she had started lower or let the company make the first move. Language matters tremendously when presenting your anchor. Saying, "I'm looking for something in the $150,000 range" sounds more flexible than "I need exactly $150,000. Adding context strengthens your position. Based on my research and experience level, I'm targeting compensation around $150,000. This phrasing demonstrates thoughtfulness rather than arbitrary demands. Consider anchoring with ranges rather than single numbers. When you say, "I'm looking for $140,000 to $155,000, you create negotiating room while still establishing your expectation floor. Research from Harvard Business School indicates that range anchors often result in higher final offers because they suggest flexibility while maintaining ambitious targets. The most successful negotiators understand that anchoring isn't manipulation, it's information sharing. You're helping employers understand your market value and professional expectations. Done ethically, this transparency benefits both parties by establishing realistic parameters for productive discussion rather than wasteful back and forth around mismatched expectations. Part 3. The dance of listening. Reading between corporate lines, when your hiring manager pauses mid-sentence and says, "Well, we'll need to see what we can do about that number," they've just handed you critical intelligence. Most people hear polite deflection. Skilled negotiators hear the word "see," a clear signal that movement exists, even if constrained by process or approvals. The difference between average and exceptional salary negotiators often comes down to how well they listen during these pivotal conversations. While others focus on delivering their next compelling argument, top performers tune into subtleties that reveal the true landscape of possibility. Consider the case of software engineer Maria Rodriguez, who noticed her potential manager speaking faster when discussing base salary, but slowing down considerably when mentioning total compensation package. That pace shift told her everything she needed to know. Instead of pushing harder on the base number, she pivoted to explore equity options and professional development budgets, areas where the manager clearly had more flexibility. The result was a package worth $15,000 more than her original target. Tone carries tremendous weight in these conversations. When Netflix's former chief talent officer Patty McCord conducted salary discussions, she paid attention to how candidates responded to questions about their current compensation. Defensive tones suggested room for negotiation, while confident, matter-of-fact responses indicated candidates who knew their worth and weren't desperate to move. Watch for linguistic patterns that reveal constraints versus flexibility. Phrases like budget limitations or policy restrictions sound final, but they often mask approval processes rather than hard ceilings. When Reed Hastings was building Netflix's early team, he frequently told candidates, "I'll need to run this by our board," which wasn't a rejection. It was his way of buying time to restructure offers creatively. Physical cues matter just as much as verbal ones. Notice when decision-makers lean forward during your conversation. This engagement often occurs when you mention skills or experiences that directly solve their problems. Smart negotiators capitalize on these moments by expanding on those specific qualifications rather than returning to rehearsed talking points. The most profitable listening happens when you pick up on unspoken opportunities. When hiring managers mention performance reviews in 6 months or our bonus structure, they're opening doors to future compensation discussions. These seemingly casual comments often represent your best path forward when immediate salary increases face resistance. Active listening during salary negotiations isn't passive, it's strategic intelligence gathering. Every pause, every word choice, and every shift in energy provides data about what's possible, what's constrained, and where your next move should focus. Part 4. Power and Pause. The strategic use of silence in persuasion. When Netflix CEO Reed Hastings sat across from blockbuster executives in 2000, proposing a partnership that could have saved their empire, he made his pitch and then did something unexpected. He stopped talking. The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds before Blockbuster's team dismissed the proposal. That calculated pause revealed more about power dynamics than any additional words could have conveyed. Silence operates as negotiation's secret weapon because it shifts psychological pressure. Most people experience discomfort during conversational pauses and rush to fill the void. When you state your salary expectation and remain quiet, you force the other person to respond first. This simple act transfers control. They might reveal their budget constraints, express willingness to consider your request, or accidentally offer more than you initially asked for. FBI hostage negotiator Chris Voss documented this phenomenon during his career. When suspects made demands, his team would respond and then wait. The resulting silence often prompted criminals to continue talking, revealing crucial information or softening their positions. This same principle applies to salary discussions. After presenting your case for a raise, resist the urge to elaborate or justify. Let your request stand alone. The psychology behind strategic silence connects to what researchers call cognitive load theory. When faced with quiet moments, our brains work harder to process information and formulate responses. This mental effort often leads to more honest, less calculated reactions. Your hiring manager might accidentally reveal their true budget, or express genuine enthusiasm for your contribution when pressure mounts during extended pauses. Google's former head of people operations, Laszlo Bock, observed that candidates who mastered strategic pauses during negotiations often received better offers. They appeared more confident and thoughtful compared to those who filled every moment with words. The key lies in maintaining calm composure during these quiet intervals. Your body language should convey patience, not anxiety. Practicing restraint requires conscious effort. Record yourself during mock negotiations to identify verbal fillers like actually, or you know. These habits signal nervousness and diminish your authority. Instead, take deliberate breaths between thoughts. If someone asks about your salary expectations, state your number clearly and then wait for their response. Real estate mogul Barbara Corcoran built her empire partly through strategic silence during property negotiations. She would present offers and then remain completely quiet, even when clients seemed uncomfortable. This technique helped her close deals that talkative competitors lost. The same principle applies whether you're negotiating a starting salary or asking for a promotion. Strategic silence works because it communicates self-assurance. People who constantly explain or over-justify their requests appear uncertain about their worth. When you speak confidently and then pause, you demonstrate faith in your value proposition. This unspoken message often proves more persuasive than additional arguments. The most effective negotiators treat silence like punctuation in a well-written sentence. Each pause serves a purpose, creating emphasis and allowing important information to resonate. Master this subtle art and watch how conversations shift in your favor. Part 5. The Turning Point Offer. When yes, no, and maybe redefine the relationship. When Netflix CFO David Wells received Patty McCord's salary negotiation request in 2002, the conversation reached what she later called the make-or-break moment. McCord, who would become Netflix's chief talent officer, had presented her case with precision. Wells paused, leaned back, and said, "Here's what I can do." Those 5 words transformed not just her compensation, but established the trust that would define their professional partnership for over a decade. The turning point in salary negotiations rarely arrives with fanfare. Instead, it emerges through subtle shifts in language, body posture, and conversational rhythm. When your manager says, "Let me see what I can do," versus "That's not possible right now," you're hearing fundamentally different messages about both immediate prospects and long-term relationship dynamics. Research from Harvard Business School shows that 73% of negotiation outcomes hinge on how parties interpret and respond to pivotal moments. These crucial seconds determine whether conversations build bridges or create barriers. Consider how Sheryl Sandberg handled her Facebook offer negotiation with Mark Zuckerberg. When he presented the initial package, she responded with genuine appreciation before outlining her concerns. This approach preserved the relationship while creating space for adjustment. Conditional offers require particularly delicate handling. When someone says, "If we hit our Q4 targets, we can revisit this," they're extending an invitation disguised as a limitation. The strategic response involves clarifying specifics while expressing commitment. "I appreciate the performance-based approach. Can we define the specific metrics and timeline?" This phrasing demonstrates engagement rather than skepticism. Soft rejections demand even greater finesse. When budgets truly prevent immediate salary increases, skilled negotiators explore adjacent possibilities. After Airbnb's Brian Chesky couldn't meet an engineer's salary request due to startup constraints, they crafted an equity arrangement that ultimately proved more valuable than the original ask. The key lay in Chesky's honest explanation and creative alternative thinking. The aftermath of these pivotal moments shapes future interactions profoundly. Managers remember how employees handle both acceptance and disappointment. Those who respond graciously to no often receive unexpected opportunities later. Conversely, burning bridges over salary negotiations can limit career trajectories within organizations. Smart negotiators prepare multiple response strategies before entering decisive conversations. They anticipate various scenarios and practice measured reactions. This preparation prevents emotional responses that might damage professional relationships permanently. The most successful professionals understand that salary negotiations are relationship investments, not single transactions. They recognize that today's maybe might become tomorrow's yes if handled with wisdom and patience. Chapter 4. The Aftermath. From Victory to Value Creation. Part 1. The Win That Lasts. Securing the Agreement in Writing. When Netflix's former VP of Engineering, Alex Loktev, negotiated his departure package in 2018, he thought a handshake agreement with his director was enough. 6 months later, when stock options didn't vest as promised, he learned a costly lesson. Without documentation, even the most sincere verbal commitments become worthless memories. Your negotiation isn't complete when someone says yes. That moment marks the beginning of the most critical phase, transforming verbal agreements into bulletproof documentation. Companies process hundreds of employment changes monthly. HR departments rotate staff frequently. Your hiring manager might leave for another role. Without written confirmation, your carefully negotiated terms can evaporate faster than morning coffee. Start by requesting a formal offer letter within 48 hours. This document should itemize every detail discussed: base salary, bonus structure, stock options with vesting schedules, start dates, and specific benefits. When Salesforce engineer Sarah Chen received her verbal offer in 2019, she immediately sent a follow-up email summarizing the conversation. Her simple message began, "Thank you for the offer. To ensure we're aligned, here's my understanding of the terms we discussed." This approach yielded a comprehensive offer letter that prevented future disputes. Pay special attention to equity compensation details. Stock options require precise documentation. Strike prices, vesting cliffs, acceleration clauses, and exercise windows. Review these terms with the same intensity you'd apply to buying a house. Airbnb's early employees, who carefully documented their equity terms, became millionaires, while those who relied on verbal promises often faced disappointment during the company's IPO. Examine performance bonus criteria meticulously. Vague language like "based on company performance" should trigger immediate clarification requests. Request specific metrics, calculation methods, and payout timelines. Document any verbal promises about promotion timelines, professional development budgets, or flexible work arrangements. Create a negotiation summary email after receiving your offer letter. List any discrepancies between verbal discussions and written terms. This professional follow-up demonstrates attention to detail while protecting your interests. Keep the tone collaborative. I noticed a few minor differences between our conversation and the offer letter. Could we clarify these points? Review reporting structures, job titles, and responsibilities carefully. Ambiguous language in these areas can lead to scope creep or unclear career progression paths. When possible, include specific examples of decision-making authority or team size expectations. Consider consulting an employment attorney for senior roles or complex equity packages. The investment typically pays for itself by identifying problematic clauses or negotiating better terms. Many attorneys offer flat-fee reviews for standard employment agreements. True negotiation mastery means recognizing that verbal agreements are just the opening act. The real performance happens when you transform those conversations into ironclad documentation that protects your professional future. Your handshake might seal the deal, but your signature secures your success. Part 2. The Ripple Effect. How your negotiation sets a new standard for others. When software engineer Lily Singh walked into her manager's office at a mid-sized tech company in 2018, she had no idea her salary negotiation would eventually become a case study in organizational change. 6 months after securing a 22% raise, Singh discovered that 3 junior engineers on her team had successfully negotiated increases using her approach as a template. Her individual victory had quietly transformed her company's compensation culture. Your salary negotiation creates ripples that extend far beyond your paycheck. Research from Harvard Business School shows that when one employee successfully negotiates, it increases the likelihood of others attempting similar conversations by 40%. This phenomenon occurs because success stories normalize the practice of asking for more money, breaking down psychological barriers that keep many workers from advocating for themselves. Consider what happened at Salesforce after CEO Mark Benioff conducted a comprehensive pay audit in 2015. The process began when a single female executive challenged pay disparities during her own negotiation discussion. That conversation sparked a company-wide investigation, revealing systemic inequities. Salesforce ultimately spent $6 million adjusting salaries to eliminate gender pay gaps, establishing them as an industry leader in compensation fairness. Your negotiation style sends powerful signals about workplace culture. When you approach salary discussions with preparation, confidence, and respect, you demonstrate that compensation conversations can be professional rather than adversarial. Managers who experience well-structured negotiations often become more open to future discussions, creating easier paths for colleagues who follow. The data supports this cultural shift. Companies where employees regularly negotiate salaries show higher overall satisfaction scores and lower turnover rates. Workers feel empowered to discuss their value, leading to more transparent communication about performance expectations and career growth opportunities. Historic examples illustrate the broader impact of individual advocacy. In 1963, Katherine Johnson's persistent requests for recognition and appropriate compensation at NASA helped establish clear protocols for crediting scientific contributions. Her advocacy created frameworks that benefited countless researchers who followed. Similarly, when tennis champion Billie Jean King demanded equal prize money in the 1970s, her negotiations fundamentally changed how professional sports approach gender equity in compensation. The leadership implications extend beyond immediate teams. When you negotiate assertively but respectfully, you model behavior that encourages fairness across hierarchies. Junior employees observe how their managers handle these conversations, learning both what to request and how to present their cases professionally. Your successful negotiation becomes part of organizational memory. HR departments track negotiation patterns, often adjusting salary bands and promotion criteria based on what employees actually request and receive. Your individual success contributes to collective progress, creating benchmarks that help future candidates understand their worth and ask appropriately. Think of your negotiation as contributing to a larger movement toward workplace equity. Each conversation that results in fair compensation helps establish market standards that benefit entire professional communities. Your personal victory becomes a building block in the ongoing effort to create workplaces where asking for appropriate compensation is standard practice, not exceptional courage. Part 3. Learning from defeat. When the raise doesn't come when Netflix CEO Reed Hastings was rejected by multiple investment firms in the late 1990s, he didn't abandon his streaming vision. He refined his pitch and eventually secured $120 million from Kleiner Perkins. Sometimes the most valuable lessons emerge not from immediate wins, but from temporary setbacks that force strategic recalibration. The first sting of hearing no. After a salary negotiation cuts deep, your carefully prepared arguments, market research, and courage gathering suddenly feel worthless. This emotional response is completely normal and shared by professionals from entry-level associates to C-suite executives. Research from Harvard Business School shows that 73% of negotiators experience what psychologists call rejection sensitivity after unsuccessful salary discussions. The key lies in treating this outcome as data, not defeat. When Sheryl Sandberg was turned down for a significant raise at Google in 2006, she didn't retreat into self-doubt. Instead, she systematically analyzed the feedback, identified skill gaps, and created a development plan. 2 years later, she leveraged that experience to negotiate a more substantial package at Facebook. Her initial rejection became the foundation for a career transformation that ultimately made her one of tech's most influential executives. Recovery begins with honest self-assessment within 48 hours of the conversation. What specific reasons did your manager provide? Were there legitimate concerns about your performance metrics, market conditions, or budget constraints? Distinguish yourself from emotional reactions by writing down the actual words used during your discussion. This exercise often reveals actionable insights hidden beneath initial disappointment. Professional relationships require careful preservation after rejection. Maintain your usual collaborative spirit and avoid passive-aggressive behaviors that signal resentment. Sarah Blakely, founder of Spanx, credits her early career rejections with teaching her this crucial skill. When denied promotions at multiple companies, she continued delivering exceptional work while quietly planning her next moves. These maintained relationships later provided references and connections that proved invaluable when launching her own venture. Strategic planning transforms temporary setbacks into competitive advantages. Create a 6-month improvement timeline addressing the specific concerns raised during your negotiation. Document new achievements, acquire requested certifications, or exceed performance targets that directly address the feedback received. This approach demonstrates growth mindset and professional maturity. Consider whether rejection might indicate misalignment with your current organization's growth trajectory. Sometimes, no reveals that your value proposition exceeds your company's capacity or vision. Tech executive Julie Zuo used a Facebook promotion denial as motivation to explore external opportunities, ultimately discovering roles at higher compensation levels than her original request would have provided. Frame this experience as one data point in a decades-long career strategy. Each negotiation, successful or otherwise, builds your comfort with advocating for yourself and provides market intelligence about your value. The skills developed through this process compound over time, creating negotiation capabilities that serve you throughout your professional journey. Part 4. Beyond money, negotiating for freedom, growth, and fulfillment. When Netflix's Reed Hastings offered early employees unlimited vacation days instead of higher salaries, most colleagues thought he'd lost his mind. Today, that decision represents one of the most radical shifts in how we define workplace compensation, proving that smart professionals negotiate for experiences and autonomy, not just bigger paychecks. The most sophisticated negotiators today recognize that money alone rarely creates lasting career satisfaction. Research from MIT's Sloan School of Management reveals that professionals who negotiate for comprehensive packages, including flexible work arrangements, report 40% higher job satisfaction than those focused solely on salary increases. This data points to a fundamental truth about modern work. Your quality of life often matters more than your bank account balance. Consider Buffer's Joel Gascoigne, who famously negotiated a 4-day workweek at his previous startup role before founding his own company. That single negotiation taught him that productivity peaks when personal well-being is protected, leading him to implement similar policies company-wide. His experience demonstrates how negotiating for freedom can create ripple effects that extend far beyond personal benefit. The most valuable negotiations often center around growth opportunities. When Sheryl Sandberg joined Google, she negotiated not just salary, but direct access to executive meetings and decision-making processes. This strategic focus on learning acceleration contributed more to her career trajectory than any salary increase could have provided. Smart negotiators recognize that skills and network development compound over time, creating exponential career value. Stock options represent another powerful negotiation tool beyond base salary. Early Uber employees who negotiated equity packages instead of higher salaries earned millions during the company's public offering. However, equity negotiations require careful evaluation of company fundamentals, vesting schedules, and tax implications. The key is treating equity as part of total compensation rather than a secondary consideration. Remote work privileges have become increasingly valuable negotiation assets. GitLab's all-remote workforce saves employees an average of $4,000 annually in commuting costs while providing location independence. When negotiating remote arrangements, frame the discussion around productivity metrics and results rather than convenience. Present concrete examples of how remote work enhances your performance. Professional development budgets offer another negotiation avenue with lasting impact. Amazon allocates up to $12,000 annually for employee education through their Career Choice program. Negotiating similar opportunities demonstrates your commitment to growth while providing tangible skills that increase your market value. This approach creates win-win scenarios where companies invest in talent retention while employees build capabilities. Purpose-driven roles increasingly influence negotiation priorities. Patagonia employees often accept lower salaries in exchange for meaningful environmental work and company mission alignment. This trade-off reflects growing recognition that job satisfaction stems from values alignment as much as financial compensation. The most effective negotiators today craft holistic packages that support their desired lifestyle rather than simply maximizing income. This approach requires honest self-assessment about your priorities and non-negotiable elements. True negotiation mastery means creating conditions where you can thrive professionally while maintaining personal well-being and continued growth.